Rabbi, thanks for your visit here in Poland. We are speaking moments after the 18th anniversary of liberation of the German concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. You were here along with many international leaders, with Jewish leaders, but heads of states and several personalities. What is the message that the world should hear after 80 years? After this tragic moment, we still, at least here in this part of Europe, have problems with understanding that there was a certain policy behind killing so many people here in German concentration camps. Which are located right now in Poland, that was under German occupation back then.
And built by the Germans. I think the message is that there are few nations in the world who understand mutually the kind of repercussions for hate ideologies like the Jews and the Poles. Remember, the Jews were exterminated. 3 million Polish Jews were murdered, 90% of the population, 6 million Jews, because they were seen not just as subhuman, but as vermin. The Poles weren't fully exterminated, but they were subjected to horrors, the likes of which the human mind can barely comprehend, because they were also subhuman. They were Slavs. So they were one step above Jews, but they were subhuman. This criminal ideology of the denigration of humanity is something that we're seeing with the kind of hatred that is spreading now, mostly religious. There's many people who are spreading, for example, a jihadi philosophy that says that Jews don't deserve to live, they don't deserve to have a state, and who are rejecting European Western civilization. That's an encroachment on the kind of European and Western values that we cherish in the United States as well. That is a direct threat to democracy. So it's not as if these ideologies have disappeared. They've just transmigrated from racial ideologies to more of religious or sectarian ideologies. But Israel right now was just attacked on October 7th with a Holocaust-level day of extinction, albeit one day and not 4 years, but 1,200 people beheaded, burned to death, etc. And I think that there are two countries who are still very traumatized by the Second World War, as if it happened almost yesterday. The Jewish people with Holocaust memory, and Poland. Everywhere I go in Poland, the specter, the ghost, the shadow, and the clouds of the Second World War remain. Even among younger people like you and me who were not alive at the time, it's always present. And what we see, thank God, are these two nations rising, and that's why our friendship is so critical. Poland is now the 4th or 5th largest economy in Europe, and it's exploding. And I see it every time I come to Warsaw. Warsaw is developing into a great global metropolis. Technology, AI, Poland is becoming certainly a leader throughout Europe. Same thing is true of Israel. Israel is an AI and high-tech revolutionary country. I would like to see the Polish and Jewish nations united not just by a shared history of oppression by the Germans or by any other nation, but by a shared commitment to seeing both nations rise above that kind of hatred and discrimination.
Rabbi, there is also a question which is a kind of a political question when we look at the political scene basically throughout the West. What's the reason for which left nowadays is openly pro-terrorist? I mean, the academia in the eastern coast of United States is basically a place where terrorist flags are waving on the campuses of the universities. When you look at the political platforms of liberal left parties, they are openly supporting not only illegal migration, but also terrorist ideology that is a part of several political entities all around the world right now. What's the reason for this? It wasn't always the part of the left ideology and the political platform.
Well, the political left has disgraced itself by betraying all of its core values. They say they're pro-LGBTQ rights, and yet they support Hamas that would castrate, or Iran, any gay man. Iran literally hangs gay men from cranes and streets, and the left is on the side of Iran against Israel. If that's not a betrayal. Or women's rights. Think about things like clitoridectomies, that a woman is circumcised. I mean, even to say this bespeaks such horrors. The left is supporting things like this, if not overtly, then unwittingly by supporting the groups who perpetrate these criminal acts. Their anti-Semitism and their hatred of the only Jewish state in the world is mind-boggling. Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel is the only country where you can speak freely. You can go on, any Arab could go in front of Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Jerusalem and curse him out as fraudulently as a genocidal leader, and you know what will happen to them? Nothing. You say one word about Hamas in Gaza, they'll stone you to death before you have finished the sentence. So the left has utterly betrayed its own values. It's not only about them supporting evil, it's about them standing for an ideology that undermines everything that they represent. And that's why you see a crisis on the left. President Trump didn't only win the Electoral College. He won the popular vote. Everybody said that was an impossibility in the United States. And now you see the rise of right-wing parties throughout Europe, something that we never thought possible, whether it's in Germany or whether it's in the Netherlands, like Geert Wilders and others who are very, very pro-Israel. And, of course, law and justice. I was very grateful to everything that Prime Minister Morawiecki, President Duda did for Israel, the relationship with Israel, and being one of the only two countries, along with Hungary, who actually stood up for Israel at the EU. The EU is also profoundly anti-Israel. And by the way, that calls into question also Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who was the head of the EU. Now, we've seen a marked change in Poland's attitude toward Israel since he took office. We want to see Prime Minister Tusk condemning Hamas. We want to see Prime Minister Tusk condemning the gang rape of women. We want to see Prime Minister Tusk saying that Hamas is a criminal ideology. And who understands that better than the Poles, who were invaded by the SS, the Gestapo, and the German Nazis in 1939? That's what Hamas is, a genocidal ideology. What doesn't Poland get, or the more left-wing progressive side of Poland? Like I said, there are two nations above all else in the world who understand a genocidal ideology, and that's Poland, the only country who did not capitulate to the Germans, who fought from day one, 1st September 1931, overwhelmed right here in Warsaw, bombed to smithereens. They moved their government in exile, and they never once collaborated, not like the French, who had a Marshal Pétain was the great hero of the First World War. Then he became a traitor to his people. He became an ally of Hitler, and he actually set up a collaborationist government that encompassed 3/4 of France. Is France going to deny that today? I saw President Macron at Auschwitz the other day. It took France 75 years to admit that their police, not the Gestapo, not the SS, deported 80,000 Jews to Auschwitz over 8 days. It took 8 days to get from Paris to here in Poland and Auschwitz. It took them 75 years to admit that. So Poland understands this, and that's why they have to be the great allies of Israel and the Jewish people. I have spent decades of my life building these bridges. There's been so many misunderstandings. And it begins with two things, I believe. This critical relationship between the Jewish community and Israel, and American Jewry, who exert significant political influence in the United States and the country of Poland. It takes two things. Number one, it takes appreciation on the part of the Jewish community to say Poland has preserved all the extermination camps. They honor the memory of the 6 million. Poland always fought Hitler at tremendous personal sacrifice and cost. I mean, you go around Warsaw, 95% of this city was obliterated by Hitler. I've never heard of a city where 95% was destroyed. You know, Berlin, 40, 50%, they think that was 95%. The first thing is appreciation on the part of the Jewish community, the preservation of the Jewish cemeteries, the rebuilding of the most famous Jewish cemetery in all of Europe, here in Warsaw, all done with taxpayer money from Polish citizens, which we Jews around the world greatly appreciate, and we have to articulate that appreciation. And the second thing comes from Poles' understanding that there's a history that we have to commit to in terms of fighting for liberty and freedom. And that begins with Poland being such a powerful European country as it asserts its growing dominance being a great supporter of Israel at the EU, the condemnation of Hamas, the condemnation of terrorism. I mean, we Jews are disgusted by what's happening in Europe. Jews can't wear a kippah on the streets of Brussels. Jews can't wear a Magen David on the streets of London. Jews are threatened with violence on the streets of Paris. But I was doing a video for all of my, thank God I have a global following on social media. I was showing them, I'm walking around Krakow, I'm walking around Warsaw. Not only am I completely and utterly safe, looking very Jewish and with a kippah, no one even looks at me. It's normal to be a Jew in Poland. That is not true in Amsterdam, where I can be attacked.
Rabbi, thank you very much for your time, for your presence here at Telewizja Republika, and thanks for your thoughts and your great speech in Washington.
Thank you for Republica's immense support for Israel, the Jewish community. I so enjoyed meeting your community in Washington, D.C. at President Trump's inaugural, and it showed tremendous respect from the people of Poland to travel with such a large delegation to honor our president, to honor our new administration, and to honor the friendship of Poland and the United States of America. And I should also say, in 2017, right after the world's most famous Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel, died, I've been to Poland countless times. My grandfather's from Lomża, great beer. I just wish I had time on this trip to go and have a beer in Lomża. But I'm a Polish Jewish American. And when I came here in 2017 to write my book about the Holocaust, going to 100 Holocaust sites from Germany, Sachsenhausen, Mauthausen, and here in Auschwitz-Birkenau, Majdanek, etc., I came to President Trump's speech here in Warsaw. And let's remember, the very first speech that the newly elected president of the United States gave at the beginning of the summer of 2017, the first speech he gave in Europe was right here in Warsaw at the Resistance Monument, in order for Americans to remember that one of the only countries who joined Britain in fighting the Nazis the entire time was not Hungary, who were collaborationists, not France, who were collaborationists, not Belgians, who were collaborationists, but Poland, who always fought. And that is a tremendous legacy that Poles should take immense pride in.
Rabbi, thank you very much for your time and for your presence here in our brand new studio, which is just about to be finished.
Thank you.
Terror and fear in Brussels, 3 days and 3 shootings. In the center of the city scenes like in a movie, armed assailants shooting at people. But it's not a movie, it's the reality of Western European residents. The Belgian police already explicitly admit, we are dealing with immigrant gangs. Wherever Islamic migrants have been allowed in without a second thought, no one can feel safe. For me, the curfew is 7 p.m. I don't leave the house in the evening because I'm afraid that something bad will happen to me. Here in my own city, I have children for whom I am very afraid because you can see for yourselves what is happening here. We have to live with this fear. It's not just Brussels, it's the same everywhere in Belgium. Not only there. These are the streets of German cities, overrun by hordes of culturally alien immigrants. Sowing fear and violence is a pastime for them, because they didn't come here to work. They are sustained by those they terrorize. This is what Western Europe looks like in 2025. A majority of these migrants, especially just in recent years, who have arrived, are people who have had contact with weapons, with terrorist activities, with warfare of various kinds. They are trained in the use of firearms and explosives. They are fanatical, ruthless, and completely immune to the actions not only of the law, but also our culture, which used to function properly, but no longer does in Europe. The liberals ruling Western European countries sacrificed European culture and the safety of their own citizens to let in illegal immigrants. But the highest price was paid by the defenseless residents of these countries. Like the 11-year-old Dutch girl stabbed to death by a Syrian on the street of her city a week ago. Or another 11-year-old girl. Yesterday, she did not return home from middle school. She was kidnapped by an illegal immigrant from North Africa. At night in the Templar forest in her hometown in northern France, her body was found. The price of an open-door policy for Islamic immigrants was also the attack by a Saudi terrorist on people visiting a Christmas market. And these are just examples from the past few weeks. The streets are not safe. We have a lot of knife attacks, sexual assaults, rapes, gun attacks, attacks on public transportation, attacks in stores. These aren't just big, spectacular terrorist attacks. This is first and foremost a radical reduction in the level of security for ordinary people on a daily basis. This is the consequence of this naive, foolish way of bringing in immigrants from countries that are very culturally distant. Milan Cathedral, a gem of Gothic architecture, but those who welcomed the new year here greatly regretted it. Illegal immigrants gathered here to threaten Europeans. Socialist-ruled Spain is literally being flooded by a wave of migrants from North Africa and the Middle East. In Sweden, not a day goes by without a shooting. And in France, not a day without cars being set on fire, storefronts smashed, or women sexually assaulted. There is not a single example of a society containing very separate cultures, civilizations, in which everything would take place peacefully. This is a pipe dream. What progressive circles have been telling us for 20-30 years is that this globalization, that this mixing of cultures can be a source of wealth, happiness, and development. It's a pipe dream. It is a fiction. It is a utopia. The liberal vision of migration policy is collapsing, but the highest price is being paid, not by politicians who brought in illegal immigrants without control or thought, but by ordinary people being terrorized, robbed, and assaulted every day in their own countries and their own cities. The U.S. Defense Secretary will arrive in Poland next week. Before that, Pete Hegseth will visit Germany and Belgium, where he is expected to hold talks with defense ministers of NATO countries and attend a meeting of the Defense Contact Group on Ukraine. This is the first overseas trip of the new Pentagon chief, with high hopes surrounding it. In Poland, however, there are growing concerns about whether Donald Tusk's team will be able to forge good relations with the new White House administration. Last night, sirens once again wailed in Kiev. Only one of 139 Russian drones reached its target in Ukraine. A quick end to the war in Ukraine is one of the top priorities of President Donald Trump and his administration. The new Pentagon chief, captured here in yesterday's footage from a meeting with his Australian counterpart, is scheduled to discuss this with his NATO counterparts next week. The final leg of Pete Hegseth's pro-European trip is Poland. He will meet with Polish leaders to discuss our strong bilateral defense cooperation, continued deterrence efforts along NATO's eastern flank, and Poland's leadership as a model ally in defense investment and NATO burden sharing. The secretary will also visit U.S. troops stationed in Poland to discuss their key role in the region. The head of Poland's Ministry of Defense reacted enthusiastically to the news. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will be in Poland in a week. This is great news. Poland is one of the first countries that the new U.S. Secretary of Defense will visit. This is an expression of the strong partnership between Poland and America. I look forward to this visit and fruitful discussions. Poland has indeed been treated as a trusted ally by the United States for many years. Evidence of this is the approval of the Polish Army's purchase of state-of-the-art armaments, including the fifth-generation F-35 fighter jets. But according to some experts, this changed after the change of government in Warsaw. These are people from outer space as far as their military competence is concerned, and in general, Tusk is a man who has never been able to, does not know how to, and does not understand what using a country's defense and military capabilities to build its geopolitical and strategic position is all about. Added to this are the mistakes of recent years. This photo has already passed into legend as an example of the lack of elementary political imagination. So is the entry by Bogdan Klich, the current head of the embassy in Washington. The testimony before Congress that Trump wanted to join the rebels occupying the Capitol is frightening, but not surprising. Let's remember that it was friendship with this unbalanced and disrespectful of democracy politician that was supposed to be, according to Law and Justice, the guarantor of Poland's security. Calling the president of the United States a lunatic, despot, and Russian agent apparently did not escape the attention of the Americans. Thomas Rose is to head their embassy in Warsaw.
To, że zmienia się
That the ambassador is changing is one thing, but the political context of this appointment is incredible. It is an absolutely harsh slap in the face to Donald Tusk's team. Thomas Rose has repeatedly criticized the Tusk government, for instance, when public media was forcibly taken over. I'm curious as to how the New York Times, which spent 8 years inveighing against the threats to democracy posed by Law and Justice's alleged control of the media, will find a way to spin this grotesque act as yet another move to restore democracy in Donald Tusk's Poland. Poland will most likely remain an important partner for America, but the form of dialogue between Warsaw and Washington through the new ambassador may change.
to, że ten człowiek będzie w Polsce.
The fact that this man will be in Poland is a very good thing, because he will be the face of America in relations with the Polish authorities. And I think that the way of discussion, the way of conveying information, will be very important here. We will have a foretaste of the changes on the Warsaw-Washington line in less than a week, during the first visit to Poland of a senior official of the Donald Trump administration. Tens of thousands of Slovaks gathered in the central square of the capital, Bratislava, to protest the policy of reset and rapprochement with Russia, implemented by the government of Prime Minister Robert Fico, according to the opposition. The Dennik N portal estimated the number of people in Bratislava's Freedom Square at 45,000. But Slovaks protested not only in the capital. They took to the streets in dozens of other cities and towns across the country. Today, all free and peaceful, but dissatisfied citizens must stand together so that we are not consumed by a dictatorship along the lines of Russia's in the near future. We, the citizens of Slovakia, are filled with the desire to live peacefully in a safe, prosperous country. Anti-government demonstrations began last December in response to a meeting between the head of the Slovak government and Russian war criminal Vladimir Putin. And a few weeks later, Fico stood up to his party colleague and parliamentary vice president Tibor Gaspar, who said in a TV debate that Slovakia could leave the European Union. I consider it very important to express my opinion that we do not agree with the actions of this government. We are for building a better country, and now we are going backwards and constantly correcting some mistakes. This should not happen again. The tense political situation in our southern neighbors has continued for weeks. Fico has firmly rejected calls from the opposition to step down and announced new precautionary measures in the face of a possible escalation of protests. What brings us to this square is that we are not happy with this situation in Slovakia. What worries me the most is that we are heading towards Russia, which we as the younger generation don't like either. More protests are expected to take place in 2 weeks, on the 7th anniversary of the murder of investigative journalist Jan Kuciak and his fiancée. In 2018, Prime Minister Fico, who was in power at the time, was held politically responsible for the crime. In March 2018, under pressure from thousands of protests, he resigned as head of government. Tragic series in U.S. aviation. A plane with 10 people on board crashed during a winter storm in Alaska. The wreckage has already been found. No one survived. The wreckage of a Cessna Caravan was found about 50 kilometers southeast of Nome, 800 kilometers from Anchorage. The Bering Air 455 aircraft had taken off from Unalakleet. After an hour of flight, it quickly lost altitude and speed and then disappeared from the radar screen. Services searched the area for survivors in near-zero visibility conditions, but to no avail. The crash occurred at a time of heightened air safety checks in the U.S. Investigators are currently looking into 2 crashes that have occurred in recent days: a mid-air collision between a passenger plane and a military helicopter in Washington, D.C. that killed 67 people, and a medical plane crash in northeast Philadelphia that killed 7 people.